Fix Washington. Now from the state capitol, here's Hanna Scott.
Hello, welcome to the Fix Washington podcast. Today we have 4th District Representative Suzanne Schmidt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I'm really happy to be here today.
So we've had a long couple of weeks here coming off of all of the floor action with House of Origin cutoff. First, before we get into your committees, let's just talk briefly about some of what went on those long 10 days.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time on the floor. 12, 14 hours, sometimes 16 hours on the floor. And because we're in the minority and we have lower numbers, our strategy was really to, put amendments on bills and talk and try to kill some time so not all of the bad bills from the other side came over. And I think we were really successful in doing that. So.
Absolutely.
But it was a lot of hard work on the floor talking and then also running off the floor to negotiate, some amendments. And so
right. There's a lot of behind the scenes activity going
absolutely.
On for sure. But some of those 3 o'clock in the mornings they're brutal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But in the end, you mentioned how many bills didn't maybe make it over. I don't have the exact numbers, but we had something like 1,200 bills or over 1,200 bills introduced in the House this session, and only a couple hundred of them or so passed out.
Yeah.
So that's the win for House Republicans.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's the win.
Okay. So let's get into some of your committees. You're on the House, you are the ranking member, I should say, on the House Labor and Workforce Standards Committee. And there's a bill in there that's come over from the Senate. I believe it's Senate Bill 5141.
It's 5041.
5041, thank you.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of attention. And this is about unemployment for striking workers. What can you tell us about that?
So that's, it's about unemployment for striking workers. This did go through the House last year. And when it was in the House last year, I was able to, on the floor, hang amendments to it to limit it to 4 weeks. Over in the Senate, it was introduced with 26 weeks. They did bring it down to 12 weeks. But I've been told they're not going any lower than that. So it's 12 weeks. And what that means is that if a company, if workers strike, they're going to have 12 weeks of full unemployment benefits, plus there's a 2-week waiting period. So what businesses are anticipating is that their workers won't come to the negotiating table for 14 weeks.
Wow, and that's a big significant change compared to what we have going on now.
Yeah.
And there's some recent examples of how this might be impactful, right?
Right. So last year it didn't pass, but if it would have been in place last year, Boeing had their machinist strike. They had 32,000 machinists that were on strike for, I believe it was 7 weeks. And so had this been in place at that point, we would have had 14 weeks. And I don't have the exact numbers now, but I know that Boeing has told me that their financial loss to their company, the financial loss to their vendors, and to other subcontractors was very substantial. And that was with employees not receiving unemployment and coming back and negotiating a contract. Now, if we put this in place, they are going to have, like I said, 14 weeks that they can wait before they go to the negotiating table.
So a lack of urgency to get back to work.
Yeah, and that's and that's why we don't pay unemployment to striking workers right now, because it upsets the balance of the negotiation. Because right now, the way that it works is an employee or workers don't go on strike unless it's the last resort. That's the last resort. They can't get what they want negotiation-wise, or the employer's not coming to negotiate with them, and so they walk off the job.
Right.
But now if we give them this benefit, then that will sustain them. They'll be able to live pretty comfortably until that benefit ends, and then they'll want to go negotiate and get back to work.
And I don't know if you can speak to this part of it. I just know years ago when I first moved to this state, I had a job for about a year. I got laid off, and in between looking for my next job, I collected unemployment. And I believe it's true across most states. You have to go, and when you get your weekly claim in there, and you have to show that you've been applying for work, right? But I assume that doesn't happen
so in
one.
this instance, and we have actually talked about it, and I've talked about it quite extensively with ESD. The last that I was told by ESD, so that's Employment Security Department, that's who operates the unemployment claims. So, because yes, you're absolutely right. In order to be eligible for unemployment, you need to be available for work and actively looking for work. Apparently, what ESD has now came to the conclusion, and this is just in the last few weeks, that as long as the employee is attached to the employer, then they do not have to search for work. So in other words, these striking workers will not have to actively look for work while they're on strike. They're going to waive that or determine that it doesn't apply because they're still attached to the employer, because the intention is that they will return to that same employer.
Wow. So this sounds like it's going to be a mess to work out. Does it apply to teachers?
Yes, and that's something that I've received several calls. You know, all my superintendents. I have actually 4 school districts in my district, and I've been on the phone with them and emailing with them because they're very concerned about it. I've also talked with Pullman School District; they're concerned about it, and we've been talking with other experts in this issue. That. With teachers striking. So even though teachers aren't legally supposed to strike, they do. And then what usually happens is the school district files an injunction which tells them they have to go back to work, but they ignore it. And so they have a time limit in which they strike,
right,
and then they'll get back. What they have to do is be able to get back to work in time to complete their 180-day
Contracts, right? Okay. So obviously, we talked about some of the impact to companies like Boeing, but what's the impact to the unemployment department or ESD?
Yeah, it will be a significant impact. So if they just think about, if Boeing, and say we know that right now Boeing has their engineers will be negotiating a contract in the next, I believe it's the next 15 months. So they'll be negotiating their contract. So if they choose to go on strike, that's 15,000 people that are filing claims at one time.
Yeah.
And so right now, ESD or unemployment is struggling with customer service. They just don't have the workforce. They don't have the ability to process the claims that they have now, and we have low unemployment.
Right.
So to be impacted with a lot of claims in a short period of time is going to be quite a struggle for them.
And that's, and we saw that during the pandemic,
yes,
right? There was that
absolutely.
influx, and it was too much, and I think we've never totally recovered from
that.
No,
and that's exactly right. We haven't totally recovered from that, what happened in COVID. We had the loss where we had the fraud,
right,
and then we had, people being overpaid for their claims, being paid when they weren't eligible for claims. So, we're still reeling from that.
Yeah. All right. So definitely one to watch again. That's Senate Bill 5041.
Yes.
Okay. You're also the assistant ranking member on the Transportation Committee in the House. And obviously transportation, very, very important in the state. There's one bill, or several bills that get a lot of attention right now in that committee. One big one that's been talked about for years is the road usage charge bill.
Right.
Could you tell us about
that? So that bill is, it's still there. It's still alive. I actually believe that bill will be part of the budget negotiations, that we'll need to pass that in order to balance the budget. I'm hoping, and the Republican caucus is hoping, that we can get some amendments on there so that we're looking at a road usage charge for electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles rather than everyone. Because the bill right now says that it's going to be a road use charge for everyone. So that's 2.6 cents per mile, plus there's a surcharge of a 10%. So we're going to work towards, looking at, can we just, have this for electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles instead of everyone. Right now, we have, gas prices are high, and we have families that are struggling with putting gas in their cars. I know in my district, we've had, the food banks in my district have increased their clientele by like 147%. And I've been out and visited the food banks, and what they're telling me is that a lot of them are first-time users of food banks. And they're saying it's the price of gas for their cars. It's fuel in their cars that, that are really hurting them. They have 2 or 3 jobs. They have kids to take, daycare and, workout schedules together. And so that cost of gas is really hurting families. So what this would do is put additional pressure on those families. I know we hear about like the regressive taxes in Washington, and the Democrats are always talking about that we have regressive taxes, but it seems that they're the ones that keep adding and putting those regressive taxes in place. So hopefully the RUC bill is, trimmed down. The road usage charge is trimmed down before we pass, some kind of legislation. But it's out there. And the thing is that we do absolutely know that revenue is down for transportation. So.
Right. And there's so many projects, and I know there's a whole aspect of the increase in the cost of these projects that are big, I-405, 520, various other major projects, ferries, all of it, right?
Yeah. So, well, and in my district, we have the North-South Freeway.
Sure.
So, and that was fully funded actually in 2015, and then it was fully funded again in 2022. And so, but what's happened is with the decrease in revenue, OFM the Office of Financial Management has put a freeze on bidding that work. So nothing has happened since November of 2024. So we're waiting for the budget to be finalized so that we can actually start moving forward with some of those projects.
Because we're dealing with real money, and exactly.
Yeah.
And then I just want to double back on the road usage charge. You mentioned that the hope is to get an amendment or some kind of changes to it so that it only applies to electric vehicles. And that matters, right? Because we have an existing gas tax. So it's like double dipping, if you
Right, yes, exactly. So thank you for asking that. So it's like double dipping, because what we have is the electric vehicles that aren't buying gas, or the hybrids that have much higher gas mileage. Basically they're not paying any road tax right now.
Right.
They're not paying for, they're not contributing to our transportation budget, where people with gas burning cars, fuel burning cars are paying for our transportation budget. So we want to include them in this, but not double dip on the folks that are having the hardest time affording costs of transportation, gas.
And then outside of the affordability issues, I know that there are some significant privacy issues that have been raised about this.
Yes, and so when there was a pilot program a few years ago for RUC to look at the road usage charge, and one of the pilot program had a program that you could put on your phone that would basically monitor how many miles you drove and keep track of that. And I know that there's a lot of people that are not happy with that. They feel like that's really a privacy invasion. And so I know that what we've talked about doing is, if this is implemented, doing where people would estimate their mileage for the year, and you would pay that as part of your registration for your car. And then if you didn't, drive that many miles, say you average 20,000 a year, 20,000 miles, and you say that up front, that's what you're charged for when you register your car, and then you only put some, 15,000 on it, then you get some kind of credit. But that's still going to, that's still going to be like an odometer reading that we'll have to do during.
There's administrative costs attached,
right? There's administrative
costs. So there's still a cost at a time when maybe the state can't afford any new costs.
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely a lot to watch here in the next several weeks as we get through the 2025 session. I do want to ask you about the State Building Code Council, right? Is that right? So you sit on that. Why'd you join?
I joined the council because when I first came to the legislature, which I had actually known about the council before I ran for office, but I had, and I'd been told that there were no actual builders on the council. So people that are on, boots on the ground. They did have, I believe they had a plumber on the council at one point, but he left the council, and so they didn't have anybody that was actually a builder. So they had some, ergonomic people and architects and things like that. So that's why I really wanted to be in there, because I knew firsthand from the job that I had that the regulations and the building codes are what is impeding new buildings and new homes from being built. Yeah. It's just really difficult. We keep putting more and more regulations and more rules, mandates in place. And so that was something that I really feel strongly about, is that we need to roll back some of those regulations and those mandates and make it easier for things to be built and to be permitted. So that's why I actually asked if I could be on the Building Code Council, so that I would be able to, use my voice and my experience on that.
Lived experience,
yes,
right?
My lived experience. Exactly. Yeah, my lived experience on the council. So that's how I got on there. And it's been a very eye-opening experience. The information that we discuss in the building codes, and so the council has all been appointed by Governor Inslee. So everyone that's on there right now has been Governor Inslee. Governor Ferguson hasn't appointed anybody.
Okay.
Or I don't know if he's even had the time at this point to look at it. I think he has so many budget issues and other things going on. He hasn't had time to look at that yet. But they were all appointed, and so they all they share his views, his ideology, and I have more of a view of let's have a step-by-step comprehensive plan rather than going in and just doing away with something.
Right.
For example, natural gas. So because even before the natural gas bill was passed last year, the Code Council had already looked at banning natural gas in residential homes, not putting it in. So anytime anybody that built a new home would have to put in a gas pump, a heat pump. Yep. And so they'd already looked at that even before the legislation was passed. And what I want to have the voice of saying that that's not necessarily the best way to go, and we are putting a lot of stress on our electrical grid with the electrification of cars and buses, and so much that we're turning over to the grid that we really might want to look at continuing with natural gas. The other thing is I actually have seen studies with power companies, so I won't say the power company's name, but I've seen studies of, looking at natural gas actually burns more efficient in a home as a heating source than electric. And a lot of times the electric that you're running in your house or is being transmitted to your house is being produced by a natural gas generator.
Right.
So we're really not eliminating natural gas by doing that, but what we are doing is making it more difficult for people to build homes, and then people that have homes, if they've built with natural gas at some point, they'll have to retrofit. And that's thousands of dollars.
And that's right. And
tens of thousands of
I know
dollars.
I have gas in my house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I prefer to cook with gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's I've heard people say that.
Yes. And I know a lot of people feel that way.
So just a little light work there for you, right? On the council.
Yeah. Just as some kind of hobby on the side. Yeah.
Well, major issues that you're wrapped up in. Finally, I just want to ask you, as we move towards the last month or so of session, what are you most concerned about as we head towards the end of the 2025 session?
I'm most concerned about the budget negotiations that are coming forward. So that's the things that we're going to be looking at next week. We'll have the operation budget, the transportation budget, all of those are going to be introduced, or at least the proposed budgets will be introduced next Monday. Then we'll have meetings going over the budgets. And we know that with the operations budget, we're anywhere between $7 and $15 billion. And we also know that in order, I shouldn't say to balance that budget, but there are several tax bills that are still alive and most likely will come forward and be deemed necessary to pass the budget, because
which for our viewers means that they can be alive until the end of the session. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So that I'm really worried about that. Because I already know that businesses and individual homes and families are really stressed right now. They're financially they're very stressed, and so those taxes are going to make everything harder. And I know that the Republican side, we've looked at ways that we can trim the budget, cut the budget, but I don't know that a lot of those suggestions are going to be taken, or if any of those suggestions are going to be taken. I think that they're stressed to the point where this is going to be it's going to be a really difficult next 2 years.
Well, so a lot of absolutely hard work to come ahead, but I know, as we talked about earlier, there was 1,200 some bills introduced, 200 and some that passed. So House Republicans are working as a great team.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, and I did want to say that's the thing that I really respect and admire about our Republican caucus is there's 39 of us and they have 59, but we are very, very talented speakers. Every one of us can stand up and speak to a topic, and speak from the hip. Nobody writes our speeches, nobody helps us with amendments. We really stand up and speak to those, and I'm really proud of this caucus, and that's the way that we've been able to stop some of those bills that have, that they didn't make it to the floor because we burned up the time and they didn't make it to the floor, and that's because we are good speakers and we have endurance and we're really dedicated to what we're doing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, 4th District Representative Suzanne Schmidt, for joining us. Really appreciate it. It was a great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah.
Fix Washington with Hanna Scott, a podcast from Washington House Republicans. Go to our website, houserepublicans.wa.gov. Find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube.